November 1944, the University of Minnesota conducted an experiment that was the first and last of its kind. Now, this experiment would change the way how scientists and researchers would think about starvation and diet. This was led by physiologist Ansel Keys and psychologist Joseph Brozek. The scientists starved 36 young male volunteers for this cause. The purpose was to make them lose 25% of their body weight. The scientists had 4 phases to this experiment. Now the first 3 phases would go on to bring a very long-lasting negative impacts on these participants. In the first phase, that was called the control phase, these candidates were eating 3,200 calories. Now during this protocol, the Clinical of Laboratory of Physiological Hygiene conducted physiological and psychological tests to check their physical and mental health under normal conditions. The next step was a semi-starvation state where these candidates were made to eat 1,560 calories for 6 months. Now the candidates were meant to eat only potatoes, macaronis, turnips, breads, the kind of food that people during the war would eat, or mostly they would be lucky to eat these kinds of food. Now at this point they were made to do some sort of physical activity, data work, just so they could be distracted and get their mind off of thinking of food. Now scientists found out that these candidates who were starving in controlled starvation, they were eating chewing gum in middle of their work, and they were eating more chewing gum than usual, which means they were trying to compensate for the hunger that they were feeling. So the scientists had to take out this chewing gum, this factor that would tamper with the end conclusions. During this phase, the men started to look really bony, they were losing excess weight, they began to grumble, have poor mood, felt cold. Issues like hysteria and depression started to come up, even though these men never had any of these mental issues even before the experiment began. There were signs of withdrawal, social isolation, and these candidates began to display conditions of eating disorder. During the next phase, the men had to undergo restricted rehab. The men were given some amount of protein supplementation, vitamin supplementation to recover. One candidate named Sam Legg chopped off his fingers with an axe. Later, he said that he could not recall doing any of this because he was under the influence of extreme starvation and the feeling of not eating was driving him crazy. While the men were recovering with the unrestricted calorie intake, it took almost 2 years to fully recover. They were gaining weight very slowly, even with a high calorie intake, and on most occasions they were still hungry and they were suffering from really poor mental health. Now the main purpose of this study was to find out how scientists or medics could help the victims of war, the starved victims in the war during the World War II. Now please note that this study happened when illegal experiments were completely fine to perform on human subjects. When the global laws on human experiment became stringent, people were not allowed to conduct human trials or use humans as guinea pigs in questionable trials. So how is this study valuable in today's world? See, a lot of people will still do crash dieting in the hope of losing weight. Now with crash dieting, you are going to lose weight, lose muscle mass, feel weak, feel low energy, you won't feel like doing anything, and you will always be thinking about food. Now you cannot do something that you cannot sustain. Sustain means something that you want to do for a very long time and it is going to continue giving you results or help you feel better over time or help you improve your fitness status. Crash dieting, you are going to remove a large chunk of food that you are going to eat. That is not even eating correctly. If you really want to get fit, you cannot starve yourself intentionally, unintentionally, thinking that this is going to have some result, because all of this is going to backfire. What you lose is going to come back to you, and now you are starting from ground zero again. I hope this experiment was very interesting, helped you with some new information, and I will come back with more videos. See you soon.